I never imagined my Thursday evening would turn into a lesson I'd carry for the rest of my life. My name is Callum. I'm 38, and for the past 8 years, I've been married to Serafina. Not the kind of marriage with endless fireworks, but a partnership I thought was strong, steady, predictable, with the occasional laugh and quiet comfort. I'd been working in architecture for nearly 15 years, meticulous with my designs, my deadlines, and my household. I was attentive, loyal, reliable. Those were the traits she said drew her to me. "Callum, you're solid," she had said on our 3rd anniversary, smiling in that mischievous way that used to make my chest tighten. I believed her. I still do, in some corner of my mind. We weren't reckless romantics. We were steady, grounded. But steady doesn't mean immune to distance, and I learned that the hard way. Over the past few months, Serafina had changed. I noticed the small things first, the shift in tone when I complimented her, the way she pulled away from my touch, even the subtleties of her glances. Where once she'd met my eyes warmly, now there was a fleeting acknowledgement, as though I existed in her periphery, a shadow of my former importance. Thursday night, we were attending a work gala downtown. Black ties, cocktails, the soft clinking of glasses, and murmurs of conversation. Everything about the evening was meticulously planned. I had coordinated the hotel room, arranged for her favorite floral arrangement on the table, even double-checked the car service to ensure no hitches. Yet, beneath the glitter and polite chatter, I felt the tension coiling. Serafina wasn't laughing at my attempts at light banter. She wasn't her usual witty, teasing self. The spark had dulled, and I could sense the frustration in her body language, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my stomach tighten. We moved to the lounge area after dinner, a semi-private corner with a dim chandelier and low-cushioned chairs. A few colleagues mingled nearby, but not close enough to overhear. I reached out, gently brushing my hand against hers, hoping for even a fleeting moment of connection. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in impatience, almost as if I had asked her to solve a puzzle she didn't care to finish. And then she said it, casually, almost flippantly. "Callum, we need to talk. Tonight. About the bedroom." I froze, half in disbelief, half in confusion. My mind raced through scenarios, wondering if this was a joke, a passive-aggressive comment, or the prelude to something worse. "Tonight?" I asked, carefully masking my rising concern. "Yes," she said, a soft smirk playing on her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "And we're not talking later, not at home. Here, in front of everyone." The air thickened. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from the raw humiliation and shock of what she had just placed me in. She wasn't just asking for a conversation. She was issuing an ultimatum, a public test of boundaries, and perhaps power. I could feel the eyes of the room, not directly on us yet, but hovering, sensing the tension. I took a slow breath, trying to ground myself. I realized in that moment that this wasn't about pride or ego or even desire. It was about respect, dignity, and finally seeing the truth for what it was. Every gentle dismissal, every glance away, every cold shrug over the past months had culminated into this exact moment. This was the line. I said nothing, just reached for my keys. Serafina's eyebrows lifted, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps disbelief. She must have expected a confrontation, a pleading, or at the very least, a visible flinch. But I stayed calm, measured, deliberate. My hand tightened around the keyring, the familiar weight grounding me. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to challenge me, maybe to manipulate the narrative as she often did. I didn't allow it. I simply stood, straightened my jacket, and walked. The night air hit me like clarity as I stepped outside, the distant hum of traffic, the faint neon reflections bouncing off wet pavement. I didn't look back. I didn't glance at her retreating figure through the window. I didn't need to. The decision had already been made inside me. She had given the ultimatum, not in private, but in public, expecting me to bend, to compromise, to submit. I realized, right then, that bending would not restore anything. It would only extend the inevitable erosion of trust, affection, and mutual respect. I drove in silence, every red light stretching the quiet that had been building for months. My hands gripped the steering wheel, not with anger, but with deliberate calm. I wasn't running. I wasn't fleeing. I was finally acknowledging the truth that had been whispering to me through small acts of dismissal, the subtle withdrawals, and the quiet emotional absences. This was the life I had accepted for far too long, and this night had crystallized everything. I pulled into the driveway of my friend Emery, who had always been my anchor, the one who would listen without judgment, who understood the weight of loyalty and the cost of ignoring one's own dignity. I didn't announce my arrival. I simply walked inside, set my keys down on the counter, and let the quiet settle over me. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't even spoken a single word to Serafina since leaving. And yet, in that silence, I felt an unfamiliar relief. Later, I received a few messages, colleagues checking if I was all right, friends curious about the abrupt absence. I replied briefly, carefully, deliberately, keeping the narrative controlled. No explanations, no confessions, no dramatics. The fewer words I used, the stronger the message. Actions had replaced dialogue. Boundaries had replaced negotiation. Over the next several days, the ripples of that single evening extended further than I anticipated. Serafina tried, subtly, to regain control of conversations, to invite dialogue, to insert herself into moments I had now claimed for myself. But I remained calm, respectful, and, most importantly, consistent. The power in my quiet decision was not in retaliation, but in clarity. I reflected on the months leading up to that night, on the subtle withdrawals, the growing indifference, the quiet erosion of connection. I realized that this wasn't a single event. It was a pattern, a slow accumulation of small acts that had been ignored, tolerated, or rationalized. And yet, it had taken only a single, deliberate response to reclaim the respect and dignity that had been gradually chipped away. Looking back, I can see that the public ultimatum was not a challenge to me personally. It was a revelation of the limits of a relationship that had quietly decayed. It forced me to confront not only her expectations but my own tolerance for being unseen, unheard, and undervalued. That night, I didn't lose anything I wanted to keep. I gained something I hadn't realized was missing: clarity, calm, and a sense of self-respect that no ultimatum, no humiliation, and no public spectacle could ever diminish. The lesson is stark, and yet simple. Boundaries are not just necessary, they are essential. And sometimes, the quietest, calmest decision to uphold them speaks louder than any argument, any confrontation, or any plea for acknowledgement. I didn't walk away with anger or shame. I walked away with a sense of peace, subtle but undeniable, the kind that comes from finally refusing to negotiate your own dignity. And that, above all else, was worth everything.